Hello, welcome to Makeup and Monarchies. If you're new here, my name is Tiffany. I'm a cosmetologist, makeup artist, hairstylist, and lover of medieval England, Scotland, UK history. So here we talk about a person, place, or thing or event that took place in that time frame while I put on my makeup. If this is something that you like or you're interested in, please hit the subscribe button. And when you do that, make sure you ring the bell so that you get notifications when I post something. I'm also over on Instagram and TikTok under Makeup and Monarchies, the same way that it is on here. On Instagram and TikTok, I always post every day, like if there's an on this day event, if something happens that we're not covering in an episode or whatever, interesting fact. So head on over there and follow me there. Is that it for housekeeping shit? This week, we're talking Anne of Boleyn, and I'm telling you right now, this is a lengthy episode. We go into a little bit of not a little bit, we go into detail of like what happens to her at the end. I mean, if you're here, you probably know already, right? I mean, I would love it if you stick it through and listen to the whole thing. It is interesting. I personally don't dislike her. I think she was put in a shitty situation by shitty people that were in her life. She did what she thought best. I like that she had a little bit of an attitude. I like that in a girl and stood up for herself, and I think she was a strong person. I mean, look how her daughter turned out, right? They were strong. So with that being said, like I always say, let's get into it. Hi. Okay, so we're talking Anne Boleyn. Anne Boleyn was born in either 1501 or 1507 at Blickling Hall in Norfolk. Her actual birthday isn't known, and the year is speculated. It seems as though Mary was the oldest sister, and then either Anne or George was born, depending on what year you go with for her birth. It's believed her brother George was born in 1504, but their father wrote in the 1530s that his children were born before his father William's death in 1505. But William Camden wrote a history of the reign of Elizabeth I and was given access to private papers in the state archives. Camden wrote her birth year as 07, so who knows. Anne was born to Thomas Boleyn and Elizabeth Howard, whose father was Thomas Howard, the future second Duke of Norfolk. The Howards were a prominent family in England at the time, and her paternal great-great-grandfather was Lord Mayor of London for a year under Henry VI. So we're going back to like 1440s, 1450s. In her adult life, she was pretty tall with dark brown hair, and people say black, but I'm just going to be a hairstylist for a second. Sorry. Nobody has true black hair, like a level 1. That's hairstylist term. Sorry. You can have a level 2, which is darkest dark brown. That's how it's classified for us. That's a natural color, but nobody has a level 1 black hair. The darkest is darkest dark brown, which is level 2. Anyways, and she also had dark brown eyes. So growing up, Anne had a typical education for a woman of her status. She was invited to join the schoolroom of Margaret of Austria in 1513, and her education was limited to arithmetic, genealogy, grammar, history, reading, spelling, and writing. She also studied domestic skills like dancing, good manners, embroidery, household management, music, needlework, and singing. She played She played games like cards, chess, and dice, and was taught falconry, horseback riding, and hunting. Her father was doing good in his diplomatic career, and Margaret of Austria offered Anne a place in her household and called her Le Petite Boleyn, I think. Anne did well in the Netherlands with Margaret and stayed at the court of Savoy until 1513, when her father arranged for her to attend Henry's younger sister Mary. Mary was going to be marrying, I hate when that's combined, it screws me up. Mary was going to wed Louis XII of France in October of 1514. So Anne made her way to France and was maid of honor to the now Queen Mary of France. She was the maid of honor to Mary's stepdaughter Claude, who was 15. That was Louis's daughter. Anne stayed with Claude for almost 7 years. While she was with Mary, though, she finished her French studying and got interested in art, fashion, illuminated manuscripts, which is, I had to look this up. It would be like when you see an old document like from the 16th century or possibly before, don't quote me on that, but it'll have like that gold foil look to it. That's an illuminated manuscript. She also studied literature, music, poetry, and religious philosophy. Claude went on to marry Frances of Orleans, and become Francis I after Louis XII died without a legitimate heir. So Anne served the Queen, Claude. She also became very familiar with French culture. I mean, how could she not? She was like immersed in it. So dance, culture, etiquette, literature, music, and poetry. It's possible she became close to King Francis's sister, Marguerite de Navarre. Marguerite was a patron of humanists and reformer and was an author. Her writing included elements of Christian mysticism and reform that bordered on heresy, but because she was the king's sister, she was protected. It's rumored Anne was involved with Francis I, but there's no like legit legal documents saying that. It's also rumored that her older sister Mary was involved with him as well, but again, nothing solid is proving that. There is proof of him calling her Mary the English mare, so I don't know. It's kind of funny, but I mean, why would he call her a horse? Apparently Mary was the prettier one, and I doubt it was because she was ugly. I think it was because he wrote her. I digress. There is writings of this, but like I said, this was by William Rascal, who was a Catholic nephew of Thomas More, and this was in a biography William wrote about his uncle. Now, in my last episode, you'll know that Thomas More wasn't a fan of Anne, so it's safe to assume that his nephew wrote this book to back up his uncle. More wrote his fair amount of bullshit too, so who knows? I don't know. I think Mary was having a thing with Francis. I don't know about Anne, but moving on. In 1522, Anne is called back to the English court. At the time, she was supposed to marry her Irish cousin, but the marriage negotiations abruptly ended. Her older sister, Mary, had already been at English court and married William Carey in February of 1520 at Greenwich. King Henry was present at the wedding, and soon after, the two began to have an affair that lasted roughly 2 years. And as I said in my Henry Part 1 episode, it's possible he could have fathered one or both of Mary's children, but it's disputed because he didn't acknowledge those children the way he acknowledged Henry Fitzroy. So it could have been, could not have been, who knows. At the turn of the year of 1522, Anne was given a position as a lady-in-waiting to Catherine of Aragon and made her public debut at the Chateau Vert, which is the Green Castle pageant. On March 4th, she played Perseverance, being Henry's little sister, also alongside Henry's little sister Mary and Gertrude Courtenay. They were dressed all in white satin with gold thread embroidery. She became one of the stylish and accomplished women at court and had young lads competing for her. Anne was courted by Henry Percy, who was son of the Earl of Northumberland. They entered into a secret betrothal, and George Cavendish said the two had not been involved. Henry's father refused to support this engagement, and the betrothal was called off. Thomas, Wyatt, and Anne became friends, or good friends. Thomas had been married to his wife Elizabeth Cobham since 1520, and after 5 years of marriage, he charged her for adultery and separated. Funny enough, it was around this time he became more infatuated with Anne, so I'm sure you can put two and two together why he called off his marriage, or separated from his wife. Well, at this time, Anne had another man obsessed with her, and that would be King Henry VIII. He really tried to get with her, but she resisted and refused to be his mistress, which good on her. I don't know if she just didn't want to follow in her little sister's footsteps, or was like possibly like put onto it, or like told to refuse it. Who knows? We weren't there, right? We can read all this stuff. It could be documented, but sometimes reading older documents is like, it's like playing telephone. You don't know what's real because it's already been said so many times. Anywho, within the year of 1526, he proposed to her and she accepted. Both Henry and Anne were under the assumption that the annulment was going to only take a few months. Boy, were they wrong. Henry wrote love letters to Anne, and from those it looks like their affair wasn't sexual for their 7-year-long courtship. Now, we're in episode 4 in this series, and we are all aware as to why Henry wanted the annulment. It's possible that Anne saw this as an opportunity in Henry's obsession with her and a question of morals. She wouldn't lie with him until she was queen, and she stood by his side in policy and state, but not in his bed. It is possible, I'm just gonna start my eyes. It's possible Anne's commitment to the Reformation was genuine, but historians do question it. Some believe she was devout, and others believe it was convenient. There is some anecdotal evidence that Anne showed Henry a pamphlet, but this information was from George Wyatt, grandson to Thomas Wyatt. So how much truth there is debatable. He also wrote other things about her, and personally it sounds like a grandson scorned. So come 1528, the sweating sickness is just driving through London and spreading like wildfire. Henry left London because a lot of people were dying, and we all know he had a severe phobia of sickness. Anne went to her family home in Hever Castle, and came down with it there. Her brother-in-law, William Carey, got it as well, and he did not survive it. Anne recovered, and after Henry sent his own personal physician to her, like to care for her. And what is sweating sickness? I was asked this last week by one of my clients. So we were talking about this. It's exactly what it sounds like. High fever, heavy bouts of sweating. So maybe like the flu on steroids. This was something that had a high death rate. So you can imagine this spread so fast with no television or social media or even phones with alerts like we saw 4 years ago. So, I mean, I'm sure it went quickly because, I mean, we locked down with the pandemic pretty quick. Not as fast as we should have, but Henry was really after the annulment and started making plans with Thomas Wolsey, or started making plans without Thomas Wolsey. He sent his secretary William Knight to Rome to sue for the annulment. We talked about this in a little bit in the last episode. It gets like really dicey in this area because all these stories obviously mesh together because they're one, but I try and keep everything a little bit separate, like pick apart what part is whose story. So I'm not gonna go fully into this. So in short, Wolsey didn't do what Henry wanted at the time and was arrested. Catherine was banished from court and her rooms were given to Anne. The public, however, sided with Catherine, and when Anne was dining at a manor house on the River Thames in autumn of 1531, she was almost taken by a crowd of angry women, but she did escape by boat on the Thames. William Warham, the Archbishop of Canterbury, died in 1532, and the Boleyn family chaplain, Thomas Cranmer, was put into the position with papal approval. Cromwell introduced a number of acts before Parliament, including the supplication against the ordinaries and submission of the clergy. The latter recognized royal supremacy over the church, and it was that finalize the break with Rome. After this, Thomas More resigned as chancellor and left Cromwell as Henry's chief minister. All right, so I just finished the darker brown. I used MAC Swiss Chocolate as the darker brown. Now I'm going in with, this is so old. I mean, it's really not that old, but whatever. I'm gonna go in with the color Dystopian for darker on my lid. So before they married, Anne was able to grant petitions. That's exactly the color I wanted in my head too. Receive diplomats and give patronage. At this time, Anne played an important role in making an alliance with France. On September 1st of 1532, she was granted the Marquessate. She was Marquess of Pembroke. Henry performed the ceremony himself. Come end of 32, early 1533, they went to France on a diplomatic trip where Francis I supported Henry's remarriage to Anne, and all was good. January 24th or 25th of 1533, Henry and Anne had a secret wedding ceremony. So Henry was still married. Oh, good, the mic's on. Henry was still married to Catherine. Anne became pregnant very quickly. May 23rd, Cranmer declares Henry's marriage to Catherine null and void, and 5 days later he declared Henry's marriage to Anne good and valid. Anne's coronation was held on June 1st in a luxurious ceremony with a banquet afterwards. Anne was the last queen consort to be crowned separately from her husband, and was the only queen consort to be crowned with St. Edward's crown, which was only used to crown monarch. A day prior to her coronation, she took part in an elaborate procession through the streets of London, wearing white and a gold coronet with her hair down. The House of Commons forbid all appeals to Rome and exacted the penalties of praemunire against all who brought papal bulls into England. Pope Clement condemned the marriage between Henry and Anne. Obviously, you knew that was coming. And in March of 1534, declared the marriage to Catherine legal and ordered Henry to return to her. This is when the Oath of Supremacy drama started, which I spoke about in my last episode. It was late 1534 when Parliament made Henry the only supreme head of the Church of England, and that the church was now under Henry's control and not Rome's. Before and after her coronation, Anne protected and promoted Anne protected and promoted evangelicals and those wanting to study the scriptures of William Tyndale. She had a major role in influencing the Protestant reformer Matthew Parker to come to court as her chaplain. She entrusted her daughter's care to him before her death. Anne settled into a simple routine at Greenwich to get ready for the birth of her baby. Spoiler alert, like we didn't all know that happened. Here, I'm just gonna blend this out a little bit on my lid. Here we go. Supposedly getting a new, what's it called, liner in the mail today. See if it happens. So I'm gonna try and go in with my Vive in brown. Didn't come in time, so we do what we can. So Anne had her baby on September 7th of 1533, and the baby was a little bit early. It was a girl, and she was named Elizabeth. Well, the brown's not so bad. I thought it was going to be lighter. Oh, I'm doing this on camera. Elizabeth was probably named for their mothers, because Elizabeth Howard and Elizabeth of York. I'm going to go as far to say Elizabeth of York was named for her mother, Elizabeth Woodville. The baby was a bit of a disappointment to both her parents because they were expecting a boy, mainly because physicians had predicted one. Nevertheless, Elizabeth was given an impressive christening. Anne was afraid that because Mary had been stripped of her title as princess and named a bastard, that Mary was a threat to the baby's position. Henry hold on. Can you see? I'm going to try and do this. I'm awful doing this on camera. See, I told you I'm awful. My eyes are old and I need to be up front. No, not bad. A little bit better. Oh, we went for a wing today. I'm going to just go back in with that darker color and kind of smudge out in here because I want it a little bit darker. So I'm just taking a Sigma E30 brush. I don't really talk about my brushes that often, but I'm just going to kind of deepen that a little bit more. Yeah, see, that's what I needed right there. I could go in with a black, but I feel like it's going to be too much. There we go. So again, just coming over here, I'm just going to kind of follow the line from my liner and just shade that in a little bit more. Yep. Perfect. Okay. Henry separated Mary from a lot of her servants and sent Elizabeth to Hatfield House. There she had a good sized staff, and it was thought that the country air was better for the baby, and Anne visited often. I'm doing my foundation right now, so put my hair back. I can't imagine, honestly, I can't imagine being away from my children like that at all. I think it would just depress the shit out of me. But different times, different cultures, very different than it is now. Anne had a bigger staff of servants than Catherine did, and there was more than 250 people to care to her needs. It's fucking crazy. This included priests, stable boys, and more than 60 maids of honor that served her and went with her to social events. She had a few priests that acted as her confessor, and chaplains and religious advisors, and that did include Matthew Parker. Married life was pretty happy for the two in the beginning. She was super intelligent and smart, also forward. So that didn't always go over well with people. I mean, it still doesn't, but I think some people can't take honesty. Anne spent large amounts of money on gowns, jewels, headdresses. Jesus. Oh, no wonder that light was off. It was weird. Headdresses, ostrich feather fans, riding equipment, furniture, and upholstery. There were a few places that were renovated to fit her style, and her motto was the most happy. Well, clearly, because you lived a life of absolute luxury. However, she was blamed for Henry's bad temper and was called the king's whore or the naughty, I'm gonna say pike or pake, which translates to or prostitute by some of her subjects. I put the spelling up of that word. Clearly she wasn't well liked, and this didn't get any better for her after the executions of Thomas More and John Fisher. Around Christmas of 1534, she had a miscarriage. Or a stillborn, and sent Henry to discuss with Cromwell and Cranmer the possibility of divorce. Nothing happened from this at the time, as the two reconciled, spending the summer together on royal progress, and by that autumn, she was pregnant again. January 8th of 1536, Anne and Henry received the news that Catherine of Aragon had passed away. I have a freaking hair in my eye. Oh my god. Oof, I cut it. While the two seem to have rejoiced in the news, it's said that they both cried in private over her death. Anne, being pregnant, she tried to make peace with Mary now that her mother was gone, but she refused this, as there was a possibility or a rumor that Catherine had been poisoned from either Henry or Anne. That was thought because when they embalmed Catherine, her heart was found to be black, but modern experts think that was because she died due to heart cancer. It was around this time Henry began an affair with one of Anne's ladies, Jane Seymour. Supposedly, Henry gave Jane a locket that contained a picture of him in it, and she wore it in Anne's presence. Talk about fucking balls. She'd open and close it. So do you need attention? Were you trying to cause issues? It's said that Anne ripped it off of her neck so hard that her fingers bled. So again, telephone. We don't know how true that is, but rumor the tea is. On January 24th, Henry was in a jousting tournament and fell. He had a huge injury from this. He was knocked out for 2 hours and had a severe wound to his leg. This obviously caused Anne severe distress and blamed that on, God, I'm already getting pan with this. This is crazy. The miscarriage she suffered 5 days after, she blamed it on that event. The baby was obviously extremely early, and it's believed the baby was a boy. Eustace Chapuis referred to the baby as her savior because it seemed the marriage was doomed now. After the miscarriage, Henry claimed he had been seduced into the marriage by means of sortilege, which is a French term that means deception or spells. Either this was a common, I probably should have done research on this, but here's my thoughts if you would like to hear them. So this was either like a common term, or he used that term because Anne was very fluent with the French culture and language. So it was like a stick it to her type thing. At the time, Jane was moved into royal quarters at Greenwich, and her brother Edward and his wife moved with her. George Boleyn, Anne's brother, was refused the honor of the Order of the Garter. I think at this time the Boleyns knew shit was hitting the fan. So it's believed that her ally Cromwell was the main instigator of her downfall. Apparently Cromwell and Chapuis had conversations about this, and Chapuis then wrote to Charles V. So again, game of telephone. So how true, we don't know. And you know, when you hear gossip or somebody tells you something, we all twist it a little bit. I mean, we try to stay, I get some of us try to stay as close to the story as like truth as possible, but not everybody does that. So who knows how true it is. Anywho, so he was writing to Charles V to keep him in like the loop with the tea. Those letters are now in the Spanish Chronicles. It's assumed Anne pissed Cromwell off when she argued with him over redistribution of the church like funds or the revenues over foreign policy. She wanted the revenues to go to charities and schools and favored French alliance. Cromwell wanted an imperial alliance and to replace the crown's money. It suggested Anne became a threat to Cromwell. So it's also thought that there was never bad blood between Anne and Cromwell, and that he only got involved in the royal drama after Henry ordered him on the case. So again, like I said, we're never going to know because none of us were there, right? It's not like they captured it on smartphones. Somebody was being a Karen or something. He didn't come up with the adultery accusations, but he did use them to beef up Henry's case against Anne. Henry issued the charges and his officials carried them out, including Cromwell. Buckle up, bitches. Here we go. So early April, Mark Smeaton was arrested. He was a musician from Flanders. Oh, I need the light for this. I don't know what happened to my eyelashes, but I feel like broke in half. He was a musician from Flanders that was in Anne's service. He denied being one of the Queen's lovers, but confessed later, probably because he was being tortured or was being promised freedom. On May 1st, Sir Henry Norris was arrested but couldn't be tortured because of his status. I have such a hard time doing this. Let's try to move that. He denied the charges and said Queen Anne was innocent. However, there was a conversation between Norris. Oh, they did fill in great. I use Grande Lash, and I think because of my eczema, my in here I had a hole, I think from like rubbing my lids. However, there was a conversation between Henry and Anne at the end of April where she accused him of coming to her rooms or her chambers to see her and not Madge Shelton. 2 days later, Francis Weston was arrested. I need a new mascara so bad. On the same charge as Henry Norris. So was William Brereton, who was a groom of the King's Privy Chamber. Then Sir Thomas Wyatt, remember him, was imprisoned on the same charge. He was later released, probably because his family's friendship with Cromwell. Sir Robert Page was accused of having relations with Anne, but was later acquitted because they couldn't find any evidence. Ugh, this last one. Lastly, George Boleyn, Queen Anne's brother, was arrested on treason and 2 incidents of incest, one in November of 1535 and one the following month. So May 2nd, Anne is arrested and taken to the Tower of London by barge. Possible she entered through the court gate and not the Traitor's Gate. Once in the Tower, she fell to the ground and demanded to know where her father and brother were and what the charges against her were. Oh, the sun's coming out. How exciting. 10 days later, the 4 men were tried in Westminster. Weston, Brereton, and Norris maintained their innocence publicly. Only one pleaded guilty. May 15th, George and Anne are tried separately at the Tower of London in front of a jury of 27 peers. Anne was accused of adultery, incest, and high treason. Under the Treason Act of Edward III, adultery on the part of the Queen was a form of treason because of the implications for the succession of the throne. The penalty for this was hanging, drawing, and quartering for a man and being buried alive for a woman. But the accusation against her, and especially the incestuous one, was designed to question her moral character. The other treason alleged against her was plotting the king's death with her lovers so she could later marry Henry Norris. On the jury was Anne's one-time betrothed, Henry Percy. The jury found her guilty unanimously, and when the verdict was said, Henry Percy collapsed and had to be carried out of the courtroom. You fucking said yes, so what'd you expect to happen, bro? Jesus, these people. May 17th, Cranmer declares Henry's marriage to Anne null and void. That same day, George and other men were executed. I'm trying to find my itty bitty little brush to use this. Where it is. The constable of the Tower, William Knight, said Anne seemed happy and ready to be done with life. I mean, I wonder if that's not fight or flight, but oh shit. Just a coping thing. I'm putting a little skin dew in the middle of the middle of my eyes, and then I'm just gonna lightly brush that underneath my brow. There we go. I don't know what this will not blend out. So pissed. Anywho, Henry changed Anne's sentence from burning to beheading. He brought in a swordsman from Saint Omer in France to perform the execution when this was usually done with an axe. Friday, May 19th, before dawn, Anne called Knight in to hear mass with her. She swore in his presence. I can't talk when I'm doing that. She swore in his presence that she had never been unfaithful to the king, and she repeated this oath before and after receiving the sacrament of the Eucharist. Sorry, I'm not religious, so I don't know. Or just maybe I've heard it before and I forget how to pronounce it. My apologies. Anne was taken to a scaffold put up on the north side of the White Tower, wearing a petticoat under a loose gray gown of damask, the edges were lined with fur, and a mantle of ermine and an English gable hood. So I'm gonna post, this is where the spot was located. Beside her, 4 female attendants, Anne made her way from the Queen's house to the scaffold. She looked happy and as if she wasn't going to die. I'm gonna need that. She got up on the scaffold and made a short speech to the gathered crowd, which was roughly 1,000 to 2,000 people. Among the people there, present, were Cromwell, Charles Brandon, which we haven't talked about Charles Brandon. I don't know how I left him out, but I did. He was more prominent in the story on the show The Tudors than he, I think, was in real life. I mean, it's Henry Cavill, right? Henry's Henry's illegitimate son, Henry Fitzroy, was there. Thomas Howard, the Duke of Norfolk, who was her uncle, and the Lord Mayor of London was also there. Within her speech, she did not criticize Henry so that she could save Elizabeth and her family from further trouble. The ermine mantle, which was almost like what we call a shrug now, just sits on the shoulders, was taken off of her. Anne took her off her headdress and tucked her hair under a quiff. Anne took off her headdress and tucked her hair under a quiff, or it's a white cap. She said goodbye quickly to her ladies who were crying, and then knelt down, and one of her ladies tied a blindfold over her eyes. She stayed knelt upright. That was the French style of a beheading. She continuously repeated the prayer, Jesus, receive my soul. O Lord God, have pity on my soul. There was never a confession, and she only ever said that she was condemned to die. Anne gave the executioner 23 pounds, 6 shillings and 8 pence, which was provided by the king. That was roughly 2 years' wages for a guild tradesman. He asked for her forgiveness, and she pardoned him. So now, I was looking to see if I had the tower on here. I don't. I'm going to talk about the execution in detail. So if you're squeamish, you're gonna just skip forward. And like I did in my Mary Queen of Scots episode, I'll wave to you so you know when to stop and you're good to continue to watch, okay? So the hold on. Pause. The execution itself was quick. Her ladies tucked her dress so that when her body fell, she would stay covered. It's possible that the last thing she saw before they put the blindfold over her was the top of the towers of the White Tower. She was blindfolded, and the executioner I'd read this several times. She kept moving her head all around, looking, probably listening, right? I mean, anybody is blindfolded and you hear something, you're gonna move your head. So the executioner called out to his assistant to bring him his sword. And when he did that, Anne moved her head towards the sound of the assistant moving, and it was then that the executioner swung the blade, taking her head off of her body. Her body was taken by her ladies and placed in an elm chest. She was buried near her brother in the chapel of St. Peter ad Avicula in an unmarked grave. However, during renovations in 1876, so this is under Queen Victoria, her skeleton was identified. Anne's grave is now identified in the marble floor. There was a structure in the Tower Green. There is a structure, or a small monument type thing. I can't think of the word I want, but in the Tower Green for those who lost their lives within the tower walls. And I'm going to insert it here. I do want to take a second and say thank you to Jessica from Unholy Tudor and the Tudor Her story for the images. I forgot to grab some myself when we were there, so thank you to Jessica for sharing. That is it on Anne Boleyn. I am going to put my lipstick on, and I'm going to come back and we'll do some fun fact. Okay, I'm back. I used the vinyl, what is this called? Vinyl ink from Maybelline, but I did striking today. And I am not mad. I wanted to do the pink pigeon from MAC, but this was a little bit deeper than that. That's really, really bright. Anywho, fun facts for today is she did not have 6 fingers. That is the most silly thing ever. Possible she had a blemish or something on her finger that made it look like she had an extra finger, like an extra fingernail or something, but she had 10 fingers, not 11. She did not have a deformed baby. This miscarriage was very early on the pregnancy and left both parents devastated, but the baby was not deformed. She wasn't a witch, and she didn't enchant Henry. He was just girl hungry. Let's call a spade a spade. That man just wanted a piece of ass. She was queen for 1,000 days. She was the first Queen of England to be executed. She is, whether you believe in this or not, but I thought this was cool, she is the UK's most prolific prolific ghost. It's said that she haunts Tower of London and Hever Castle. Her daughter went on to become one of the longest reigning monarchs in England. So those were our fun facts for the day. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I know it was a long one. Thanks for sticking it through. So what I used today is going to be listed down below. If you have not subscribed yet, please subscribe to the channel. And if you liked this episode, give it a thumbs up and put in a comment. Even if you put like a crown or something in the comments, it helps with the algorithm of YouTube. I would greatly appreciate it. That is it for this episode. But we're gonna have an extra episode this week. So Unholy Tutor, Jessica from Unholy Tutor, graciously, we're going to accept it, or what have you. We're going to do a joint episode where we're going to talk about Mary Boleyn. So that will be out in a few days. I am so excited for that. It's gonna be fun. So look out for that. And then I think that's it for today. So I will see you in the next episode. And next episode, we're gonna talk about Jane Seymour. So have a great week. Don't forget to watch out for the extra episode this week, and I will see you guys next week. Thanks. Bye.